Hello.
Thank you for giving me the space and the time to interview about your current research. And I was kind of wondering if we could sort of begin at the beginning and you give me a sense of your research and kind of give us a brief introduction to
Sure.
what your research is about.
Yeah. So the title of my research is Feng Shui Application in Bedroom and Workplace Designs, a scientific study of personal and transpersonal preferences. So it's about Feng Shui. I'm going to explain briefly what it is, but also from a personal and transpersonal perspectives. Yeah. But I think you sent me some questions, which I found interesting about how I got into it. So very briefly, I was born in Poland in a Renaissance place called Zamość, in southeast of Poland, which really influenced my appreciation of beauty. Because if you can imagine, I live in the middle of a Renaissance place. Like, I was just beautiful. It's just designed. This rich guy, Jan Zamoyski, had plenty of money, so he thought about, why just build a big house or castle when I can build the whole city? Well, not a city, little town, yeah. So it has about 80,000 people now. So I kind of was surrounding by beautiful architecture, proportions, and also lots. Obviously, Poland is Catholic, so lots of churches. And then I studied art and design, but my father had a decorating business, so I was helping him to design some things and so on. And early on, my kind of spiritual interest started with relation to Feng Shui. Also, I learned dowsing, and dowsing is like water divining, but in Poland it's very popular. It's like a national pastime, and people do it for something called geopathic stress, which is kind of adverse energy lines. So if you're sleeping on geopathic stress, you might get unwell, if you like. Yeah. So I was doing that from the age of 12, actually, 12. Yeah. And then at the age of 15, I think I was actually a chairman of a Polish Indian society, and the reason was that I could have all the books. I love books. I'm a bookaholic. I'm a speed reader. I just published a book on speed reading this year, speeding faster. So I was like, this is my T-shirt of all the books. I probably had thousands and thousands of books. I've got a huge library of books. So I was. That's the reason I wanted to be the chairman of that society, because they had books on all kinds of transpersonal things, spiritual, yoga, Vedic astrology, etc. And there was this something called Vastu Shastra, which is the Chinese version of Feng Shui. And Vastu Shastra positioned itself as a science because it kind of loosely translates as science of dwellings, if you like. But then in one of the books, there's a Chinese version called Feng Shui. I had to find out what it means. It means wind, water. It's like, wind, water, this is science, this is wind, water, what is it? So that's how it all started. So that's the kind of part of the Feng Shui part. But also because I was part of the Catholic tradition, I was aware early on of the idea or concept of God. And I had kind of a little spiritual, for me it was a big one at the time, spiritual awakening where I was once praying. I was probably 4.5. I was praying, and this thought came to my heart like a download. And the thought was, what's beyond God? And I just disappeared. That's when my little Satori. And then other thoughts started to come in, because I was like, whoa, what other thoughts I could have? And it was like, another one was like, what's infinite? I didn't know what it meant, but I went like expanded consciousness into infinity. And the last thought I had, it was good, 3 thoughts, was how would the world look like if I didn't exist? And again, it catapulted me into this nothingness. It's emptiness, like sunyata or whatever. Yeah, it wasn't nothing. It was full, but it was like that. So that was kind of my introduction to spirituality. Obviously, it wasn't transpersonal. My personality wasn't evolved properly yet. Yeah. So, but coming back to Feng Shui, so Feng Shui has a spiritual dimension. So originally, Feng Shui about 4,000 years ago was developed by Chinese to find the best place for graveyards or resting places for ancestors, for cemeteries, because they believe that, if the ancestors rested in a nice place, they would prosper. So they have a good motivation for that, yeah. So interesting, if they knew about near-death experiences, most people, when they die, they don't care where they buried. so, so they didn't know that, but obviously it was a kind of placebo. So they were doing, and they noticed that actually those places are good for living. So, and there's a particular thing that I'm studying, and it's called armchair configuration, where you have support behind and you have open space in front. And in psychology, there's a theory called prospect and refuge, where this British geographer, Jay, I think his name is Jay, in 75, came up with the same idea, yeah? He was geographer, so although in his writing, I couldn't find that he got this idea from Feng Shui from China, but because he was geographer, I'm sure he knew about China, and I'm sure he came across this. It's such a popular concept in Feng Shui. So that's interesting, because basically, I'm also an environmental psychologist, and environmental psychology, Feng Shui is the same. It's just different is that environmental psychology is scientific and is less spiritual dimension, although it's creeping in. So more people looking at this transpersonal aspect. But in Feng Shui, it's about heaven and earth, and we are between. So that's the idea of Feng Shui. So that's how I got into Feng Shui. I've been doing Feng Shui for, I don't know, over 40 years, quite a long-standing career. And so that's how I got into it. Mm-hmm.
So in your work then, how did you come to transpersonal?
So it's always been interested in meditation. So those early kind of influences from Christianity and saints, you see saints everywhere, sacred spaces, churches, all kinds of things were part of that. And it's like second nature to me. And I got into meditation. And obviously when you study religions, you have all kinds of things. So I got into other religions like Buddhism and Zen and so on. So that was my kind of interest, and I studied rebirth, all kinds of not psychotherapies, but therapies, different kind of modalities to explore yourself, but also explore bigger self, if you like. Yeah. So
it sounds like you've been kind of, if you like, on the boil with this for quite a long time.
Oh, yes,
you've been
So
digesting
so when I started Feng Shui, I said, like, well, nobody has done. So there's a few sort of PhDs, but more theoretical about Feng Shui, and mine's kind of bigger than that, not just Feng Shui. So I thought, well, it'd be nice to have study kind of in a kind of scientific framework, because then it basically helps you to focus. My kind of issue, I'm very creative because of that background, in art and design, is I go in so many directions. I'm kind of living spherically, so many different ways. One of my first, before even I could read, I had this kind of scrapbook, and I asked my father to write everything about everything. I was collecting things, information about everything. I was into, at the age of 6, I was into the diet, of studying nutrition, and obviously in Poland was quite good because there's no pesticides. So that's my sort of interest. So science kind of very useful for me because it helps me to focus. Otherwise, I'm going so many very divergent. I need that convergent kind of mindset to do it, and I appreciate that a lot. It's in some ways it's like what was the Michelangelo said something about every block of stone has a statue inside of it, and it's just task of a sculpture to take away all the necessary stone. Obviously, he had an idea what he wanted. When I started this research, I had vague idea, sort of idea. And obviously, over the years of the last 4 years, it changed quite dramatically. Fine tuning, it's still about the same things. I'm fine-tuning the wording, fine-tuning the different studies and so on. So that's how I see myself. But it's kind of accumulation of all the things I've been doing. So I don't know what I'm going to do next after that. But it's yeah.
So we can see now that there's a background context to what you're studying. Yeah. So tell us about your research.
So basically, I just completed a study 2, which is more or less a study 1. It's just in 1. In study 1, I look at preferences and I'll probably add some pictures so people can have an idea how it looks for bedrooms and workplaces. And I look at 5 Feng Shui principles, which I'm going to get into that in a minute. So, but basically looking at visuals. So it's an online study, and people were asked to rate and rank. So that's the study 2. But the study 1 was the same pictures, and it's just I separated rating and ranking. So just to see which kind of modality would be better. But in the study 2, I combined them. So just to see as a way of eliciting better responses. And obviously, so that's kind of part of the Feng Shui bit. And then I had 5 free questionnaires. So it's personal questionnaire, big 5, then 2 kind of nature-related questionnaires. I'll post them on the video so you can see them. And the last one is kind of transpersonal, but it includes personal and environmental questions as well. So there is that transpersonal aspect in the study. And that was partly because of my one of my supervisors, Harris Friedman. So we met earlier before he actually suggested out of trust because he was involved. And we met earlier because we were asked to write a chapter for a book, which we're working on. But then in the end, we decided not to complete it for all kinds of reasons. So then that's how we kind of met. So yes, as they say, if you've got good supervisors that think in a similar way, but challenging you, obviously, that's half of the success. So I've been lucky with Harris tremendously, and now with LGMU, because the first study is going to be, that's the cracks, because obviously online study is quite straightforward. You collect the data, analyze it, and so on. And I've found some interesting, surprising things in the study, but study 3, and that's the main reason I'm doing it, I think, is using psychophysiological measures during the exposure. So people will be in virtual environments with those virtual environment headsets in those environments in offices and bedrooms. And obviously they'll be hooked up to all kinds of psychophysiological devices or measures like electrodermal activity, what else I'm going to do? I've got the list of all the things here somewhere. Oh yeah, heart rate, eye tracking, obviously, how much people looking at different features, and the facial electromyography, which measures whether you're happy or not happy. So kind of stress levels, all kinds of little things. So basically, I'm looking at measuring not only what people say, but how their body respond. And that would be more, obviously it's not the natural environment. We're thinking of creating a little bedroom and people sit or lie down in different places, but it's not doable. And LGMU is kind of pioneering in virtual reality studies. So that's quite good, actually. I'm quite excited. And so that will be, there's only 2 studies similar on Feng Shui using psychophysiological measures in virtual reality, but they're kind of basic. So this is probably the most complex one from all the studies, and I'm sort of kind of fine-tuning it. I'm thinking, because I'm doing it full-time, but I'm thinking maybe I should do part-time. I could do more. So I love studying. You can do, my passion was originally learning and things like that. So if you're in Liverpool, I need some people. But it's going to be in the autumn. I need probably 30 participants. But for the main study, if I go back to the main study, I had about 422 participants, and they went through the whole kind of, it took, it's still there if you want to look at it, although I stopped collecting data, but I left it because people asked me, oh, can I do it? Because obviously some people, it's people didn't know that it was about Feng Shui. I asked revealed the information at the end, so it's just kind of general preference of bedrooms and workplaces. There was no mention of Feng Shui, obviously, in the initial kind of introduction, so people are still doing it, but most of them they're doing because of those questionnaires to the personal, the nature related, and transpersonal. And the transpersonal people obviously it's at the end, so people find it quite difficult. The questions are quite challenging. So even people who've been doing transpersonal development sometimes like, what does that mean? So it's and it's been well-researched questionnaire. It's called Self. So that's what, in a general sense, my studies. But the 5 principles that I'm researching, and that's kind of useful for people to know what I'm actually doing, is 3 positives. So this kind of armchair configuration where you have support, you have a support of the of a chair, and you've got support of the wall or headboards when you're in your bedroom, maybe side tables, and you can see the door, you can see the windows. As opposed to, like, I'm sitting with the back to the door. That's not good, actually, Feng Shui. But I've got a little remedy. Obviously, I'm looking at what people see. It's not about, intervention. So I've got a little silver ball here, so I can see what's behind me. Yeah. So the same when you're sleeping with your back to the door, for example, you can have a little mirror, or people naturally kind of optimize it, yeah, as well. So, and also command position is, again, away from the door. So kind of, with the support of the wall, you can see the windows, so you can see the, I'll put a picture, so it's much easier to visualize that way. And then the third principle is nature-based features. So any nature. So in your bedroom, there will be pictures of, landscape, plants, maybe some green color, maybe some wooden furniture. And the same applies to your office, so maybe wooden floor, wooden desk, some plants, maybe some landscape pictures, things like that, yeah. So these are 3 positive kind of Feng Shui principles. And then negative ones, obviously, are trying to construct with things that don't work. So sharp, oppressive, kind of angular features. So, for example, you have a lampshade above your bed, and it's kind of spiky. Or you have a table which is kind of sharp cornered glass, for example, yeah. Or you've got shelves above your head. That's kind of oppressing, yeah. So the same applies in offices. You've got maybe fluorescent lighting, which is not good for your brain. Again, shelves, maybe a desk that is glass with highly reflected, things like that, yeah. Even abstract pictures, with kind of sharp edges, angular. That kind of gives you this impression of angularity, yeah? And we know from environmental psychology, and that was my study in environmental psychology, that people prefer kind of round shapes, curves, and so on, because they're more in nature. In nature, you see some straight lines, but mostly it's irregular shapes, yeah? So all the kind of angular shapes are kind of man-made most of the time. And the 5th principle is mess and clutter. So it's obviously messy environment and so on, and the same for bedrooms and for offices, and how that affects people's performance. So basically, people would see about 40 pictures, and they had to rate them 1 to 7, the like or dislike. And then there was one section where they would have to, those 5 pictures were on 1 page, where they had to kind of rank them, move them around in order of preference, yeah. So that was the main thing, and then there was those questionnaires. And one of the nicest questionnaires, which is a visual one, where you have a representation of yourself, 1 circle, and nature, another circle. And so when they're kind of touching, there's no connection, so they're separate, yeah. And so that's the number 1. So this connection from nature, and then obviously there's more and more overlap. And finally, number 7 is complete overlap. And people would rank, where do you see yourself, as a self in relation to nature, where you're completely separate or completely overlapping or somewhere in the middle or whatever, yeah. So that was a nice little chart that help people kind of visualize. But there was some question, do you like to spend your holidays in the nature or in the city? Things like that, yeah. So kind of give people an idea of their relationship. So my idea, probably jumping the questions to do with transpersonal things, is, what's the relationship to transpersonal? So nature is the key. Yeah. So traditionally, nature has this transpersonal aspect, spiritual aspect in most traditions, and especially in Feng Shui as well. So as a physical kind of environment. And my sort of view of transpersonal is something bigger than yourself. So obviously nature is bigger than you. Obviously this room is bigger than me, so that's transpersonal as well. So that's the relationship. I would want to see whether people who have more kind of transpersonal values, if you like, they would pick better environments for living. Yeah. And I had mixed responses. I haven't finished analyzing this second study, but I had some interesting mixed responses. So things that I didn't expect, some of the things I expected. So obviously most people prefer the Feng Shui compatible environments, etc. So that's confirmed a couple of my hypotheses and kind of research questions. But there's some interesting things, So one of them was the personal preferences or personal traits like the big five and kind of nature relatedness didn't actually affect people's preferences. So what it means, this is my first kind of insight, what it means is there's something else happening. Maybe the environment is much bigger than us. Maybe our personal kind of traits don't matter that much. There's something, survival instinct, for example, or other things that are kind of influencing our choices in terms of our immediate environments and so on. So, and also there's some difference between men and women in terms of preferencing. So, for example, the women prefer kind of more Feng Shui compatible bedrooms or workplaces, or men. It's kind of, I thought would be women more preferring for security and safety, so you feel safe, but actually it's men. And women prefer more the Feng Shui compatible environments in workplaces, which is quite interesting. I haven't thought about it yet, how to look at that, but obviously I haven't finished. I haven't done the ranking, so that's another stage. So I'll see how that works. Because obviously, when you're doing, as you know, surveys, there's this survey fatigue. That's the biggest issue for things. So when I'm doing the next study, there'll be more. I'll have more time. People more comfortable. I won't, show them all the combinations on the extreme ones, and they'll have time to kind of explore a bit. And then I'll see what's happening in the body. So, and obviously I'll talk to them. So there'll be interesting things. So, but my sort of biggest takeaway is that when you look at certain pictures, for example, mass and those sharp kind of angular features, people were more comfortable with sharp angular features where you have shelves above your head and lights and stuff than mass. And I was like, again, counterintuitive, because, it's easy to clear the mess, you tidy up, and your bedroom literally in half an hour, and you have a nice bedroom. But to sort out the, the lighting or the shelves, and that takes more energy. So that was kind of, again, counterintuitive finding. So, but now I'm thinking of, not thinking about in the process of, organizing the paper to that effect. So then kind of will help me even focus more. Because again, when you start research, and it's so easy to get distracted. There's so many areas that and now obviously there's more virtual reality research, so I'm studying that, what can I do to incorporate. So this study is one of the best studies, so people can use it as a template, really, if you like. So
that leads us on really nicely to your methodology. How did you choose methodology that you've chosen, and are you including any sort of the transpersonal aspects, sort of meditative or the introspective type practice part of it?
So this is purely quantitative study. So basically it's a survey, and people look at pictures and answer the questions. So the next study will be in virtual environments. Again, there will be a survey. They'll ask the same sort of questions for personal, nature related, and transpersonal. But also I'm going to measure what's happening in the body. So there's no much kind of, so I might include that. I mean, I was kind of pushed into doing a bit of qualitative study, like a mixed method, but and we look at that obviously seriously, but I decided for quantitative at this stage. But it might change, obviously. I still haven't done my study free, so I might include that. I'm tempted to ask some questions that might kind of elicit more of the qualitative approach as well. So that's how I would design that. Obviously, I was thinking originally it would be much easier probably to do a qualitative study, because basically you just kind of interview people and show them different environments and collect the data. And in some ways, it's more closer to me, but I wanted to challenge myself. Maths and statistics is not my highest point. I had to really review my statistical knowledge and all the things, but that I need to look at. And this it's quite complex, just looking at so many different things you can study. Yeah. And some of the feedback I got is like, I was just doing too many things. And then obviously, this is nature of research. You start broadly and then you narrow it down to things that are relevant, because obviously, in a paper, you can't write in thesis, you can't write everything. So. No.
Absolutely, and I'm kind of drawn, to my next question, which is kind of it's not just relevant to your studies, right? It's relevant to all of our studies, which is this idea of understanding that it doesn't just affect the physical, what it looks like.
Yes.
There's a corresponding emotional and spiritual response to that, right?
Yes.
And
so that's why
hard to measure.
Yeah, so very hard to measure. So that's, self-reporting, as we know, it's a mixed sort of bag, if you like. So yeah, you need different ways of looking. So that's why I'm looking at physiology, because that usually, is quite straightforward. And so then that will be interesting to see how that works. But it's I completely understand the challenge. So obviously, most people, when they're exposed to environments like bedrooms and work, they don't think in terms of transpersonal. so it's personal, absolutely. Yeah, you need to look at yourself and so on. But transpersonal. So in my case, the transpersonal aspect is nature, obviously. So that's one aspect, kind of bigger self. And it was quite hard actually to design the bedrooms that are kind of neutral, but without too much kind of transpersonal thing. Like, I could go into different areas, like with some maybe slightly spiritual images, and measure that as well, but that wouldn't work. Yeah. So I just kind of kept it very clean, green colors, wooden kind of natural look, nature, neutral landscapes, nothing special. Plants, regular plants that people see. So that's, but there is a spiritual aspect, which it's not really part of my actual study, but it's sleep. I think sleep is probably the most spiritual or transpersonal aspect of our lives. Because if you think about it, we spend 1/3 of our lives, long time, sleeping. And that's what unites everybody. Obviously, some people work, some people don't work. So we can't say that the environment, like work environment, will unite us, if you like. And people have different environments and so on. Mm-hmm. So lots of differences there. But sleep is one state, we go kind of unconscious, we disappear. And in deep sleep, we disappear. The world disappears to us. Then we wake up. We know that we're in deep sleep, that we disappeared. So this kind of bigger awareness of the consciousness comes in. And I think, in many obviously traditions, sleep was a big part. And, in Tibetan tradition, they study lucid dreaming as a way of preparation for conscious dying, all kinds of things, happens in deep sleep. And apart from the health kind of aspects, it's one of the 4 kind of pillars of health. Obviously, if you don't sleep well, you get lots of problems. Most problems actually start from bad sleep in terms of making decisions, health kind of decision and so on. I mean, in extreme case, we know that sleep deprivation is one of the best torture procedures. People will tell you anything when they're deprived of sleep. So, but in terms of the spiritual aspect, and I can't really go into that. Obviously, I'll sort of go into that a bit, but it's about how you position yourself in your bedroom and for better sleep. Obviously, there's so many different aspects. I'm just going to position of the bed in relationship to the door, which implies a certain security and safety. So, so that's the only aspect.
So I'm guessing in this, this is probably the wrong language for it, but each room seems to have a character.
Yes.
And it's how someone perceives that character and whether actually they would want to kind of get to know it and be in it. Yeah. And it's that sort of relationship to something that you're trying to measure with these sensory gadgets. Yeah. To try and see. So that's really interesting, isn't it? How you're, how do you capture how do you capture that sense of a transpersonal understanding of that space?
Well, that's so that will be from the questionnaire, transpersonal and nature-related questionnaire, and then how people feel in that space in the particular setup. So where there's like full of there will be one setup where there's like everything wrong with the bedroom and the office. How do you feel? And we will know what's happening in the body, and then obviously I'll have to correlate that in some way, or see the relationship or influence in other ways. But obviously, I'm looking at Feng Shui principles, so I'm starting from that framework. But if I was doing it just for spiritual kind of understanding of space, I would study something else. I would study the aspect of nature in people's homes, or the spiritual aspect. Like, I like saints, so I go to Italy, I collect little things, saints and stuff. I just sort of like that stuff, and it's fun. So you'll see that bit. But, in many traditions, people have an altar at home. In most Indian homes, they will have a little altar, usually, in the east part of the house and so on. So many traditions have that. So that will be much easier to study in the physical environment, It's like in a similar way to there was an interesting study because obviously I'm into reading in my speed reading book. So they've done a study to look at kind of general IQ in people's in relation to how many books they have in the environment. So basically they went to people, measured the IQ on some kind of scale, and they counted how many books they have in the home, and they noticed the more books people have, the more intelligent they are. So you could measure it, quantitatively and qualitatively, because obviously it depends what sort of books you have. And that was an interesting part, just as a fun, part of the study. They noticed that it didn't really matter whether people were reading those books. Obviously, when they're reading those books, they were more intelligent, wiser. But just having books made them more intelligent. Somehow kind of activated something in the psyche or whatever to kind of access more intelligence. And it's true because, one of the kind of key principle behind environmental psychology, but also Feng Shui, is what Winston Churchill said a long time ago. He was very fond of this quote. He said, "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us." And that kind of applies to anything. We shape our personalities or transpersonal kind of selves, and then they shape us back. So so obviously there is a challenge, but I think things are changing. And especially with virtual environments, you might be, putting people in different settings and kind of seeing what's happening in their bodies. So, and also you see, you could actually measure in theory, because there is lots of, I'm not going to go into that, but how much you embody it in your body. And then that could be looked at from a transpersonal perspective. So somebody should do the research on that.
Yeah, and it's I can see that, my next question is unanswerable, really. Which is the bit about I was wondering if Feng Shui could be, or probably is, a tool for inner transformation, similar to transpersonal practice.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm just kind of, when you talk about mess, I'm coming to the end of mine, and my room, honestly, is just piles everywhere, right? The moment I have put the final full stop in, this place is going to be absolutely clean, right? It's going to be tidied away. And it's almost like the mess is a representation of the amount of what's gone in, right? So in a way, that connection with my environment very much represents an internal processing that's going on. Yeah. So is that something that, you can't measure that, right? Because I don't even know how you'd measure that or even make the association with it. But I'm guessing Feng Shui, in the way in which its principles exist, actually address that in some way.
Yes, so as I said, so it's got the spiritual transpersonal beginnings. So they position ourselves, human, between heaven and earth. So that relationship between the nature and environment is very important, yeah. And obviously your immediate environment you can control. And obviously people are different, Some people thrive in a mess. I've seen homes that are so messy, but people are super happy. The minute you tidy it up, people had problems. I remember once, and this is kind of from early on, I was this friend of mine asked me to help, and I was like, a teenager, and like, come and help me with this, his cousin. We're going to tidy up his home, yeah. And he was quite old. There was a bit of danger because kind of, he was a bit neglectful. There was rats running around, all kinds of things, yeah. But he seemed to be happy. And I thought, like, well, let's do it gradually. I didn't know anything about the environment, but my kind of natural instinct is like, you don't replant an old tree, and it can change his environment. It's like, let's do it gradually, just tidy up so it's safer. Just leave some of that mess. It doesn't matter. He's okay, yeah. But this guy was, no, I have to clean. So they cleaned everything. And I said, looking at his face, not happy, he might not live long. He lived only 2 weeks after that. He died. Just naturally, he died. He couldn't cope. You change this environment, everything's like
wow.
Nah,
well,
it was nice.
You literally cleared him up. Yeah, you literally cleared him away.
So there is in Feng Shui, but also more in environmental psychology, place attachment, which is basically addiction to things. So yeah, you clear your things, and suddenly you've got a thing. But obviously it depends how you like. So some people like neat organization, and that's how they work. So that's why you have lots of desk space, and you can do that, or wall space, or whatever. So it's a preference. You could actually learn to. Most people have preference, but you could learn to work in any environment. It doesn't matter. And obviously, people like, Alexander Fleming, discovery of penicillin, because he was very messy, lab technician. Thanks to his messiness, we've got penicillin. Coming back to the transpersonal thing, sorry, I'll just answer. So yes, you could use it as a transpersonal thing because you working with a physical environment, yourself, and so on. And at some point, that's my kind of experience, you want to go beyond Feng Shui. You don't want to be influenced by environment. You don't want to worry whether you're sitting with the back to the door or not. I'm sort of imagining that, enlightened person, doesn't matter for them too much. Obviously, they still be affected that if there's like asbestos or, I don't know, mold, whatever, and they're breathing this toxic stuff, I'm sure they'll get sick. So they can't overcome these sort of things. But in terms of kind of learned behaviors that you could overcome, the sort of personal preferences, and so on. And lots of, part of Feng Shui is also astrology and other kind of a meditative practice like space clearing. Yeah, space clearing is really clearing your energy, clearing your aura, clearing your energy, so you've got a right environment for meditation. Yeah, so that's a big part of Feng Shui.
Yes.
So
I'm kind of mindful of my own clients that since going online since COVID, they invite me willingly into their home now, right?
right.
And I'm minded now to wonder at the way those spaces have changed.
Oh yes.
Right. And I don't think it's just from a shame of being seen by me and they have to go and tidy up. I don't think that's it. I think what you're saying is that when you get internal transformation, your environment changes too. It just comes hand in hand.
Yeah. But again, it's like if that, in psychology, we got this as if principle where, if you smile, if you pretend to smile, you get that kind of behavior happening. The same with environment. So by clearing the clutter, sorting out things, moving things around, you're creating some kind of change. You change this kind of momentum. Yeah. So we know from psychology that people who are depressed, they have kind of fixed environments and so on. And by moving it around and people shift. So it's about a shift in things. So could be coming from inside or from outside, depends, how people like to do it. But both ways work. Yeah. But you can tell a lot about people's kind of mental outlook and worldviews just by looking at the environment, just looking at the books they have. Yeah. I mean, it's quite, striking. Sometimes some people don't have books. Some people don't have pictures of friends, anybody, family, anything. And it's like, why? Oh, sometimes preference, and I understand that, but sometimes there's something else going on. And you think like, yeah. So, but coming back to this transpersonal thing where you can go beyond physical. And at some point when you die, we will go beyond physical. So it's like, everybody, I believe, because there's, like 8 billion people and everybody's using Feng Shui, whether they know it or not. Obviously, China, India, there's probably 2 billion people know about it. So they use it on a regular basis. Yeah. So lots of design decisions are hanging on Feng Shui, actually, and Vastu Shastra. Yeah? So it's a useful kind of tool to kind of for sustainability and so on. Yeah. But, even, I live in London and I've been here for ages now. And people who are homeless, they kind of find a space where they have some support, usually somewhere warm and so on. So they kind of feel safe. Only once in my whole life, I saw a guy who was sleeping literally sleeping in the middle of a pavement. I couldn't believe it. I was like, he was asleep. I was going to interview. It's like, why are you doing? It's like, you could sleep next to it's a nice little niche, and they could sleep there. He was seeing him. So could be enlightened or could be mentally disturbed or whatever. We don't know, yeah. But it was so bizarre. People were just being by. So people going over. He was like, what's going on? These people is just like middle of nowhere. So yes. So obviously the environment is, because we're living in a physical reality. And transpersonal as well at the same time when we go to sleep. So yes, it's important, and how people change. You could use anything. People use all kinds of disciplines to change. So, but yeah, it is a spiritual practice in many ways, and people use it as such. Yeah. So most people, obviously, in my question, there was quite a few people who are doing Feng Shui, and they obviously knew, could figure out, but they had slightly more kind of transpersonal views on life, and connection to nature.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because from from projection, transference, all those kind of things, we have symbols in our past that we can bring and put on to things in our present, and how, in a way, we're acting that out with objects in our environment is a really interesting alignment with what you're saying, because if something has a significance to me, conscious or unconscious, and I position it in my space in a way that maybe doesn't benefit that, what can I just learn by coming into your environment and seeing it and understanding your connection to that thing?
Yeah, but even just being engaged with your own environment, seeing things in a different way. So, most people like flowers, and we have flowers and, plants and so on. But, Buddha raised a flower and one guy got enlightened. I mean, come on, that's profound, you know. How many
Yes.
people get enlightened by looking at a rose, you know? I do. I love roses, kind of fractal. So, you know, you can look at anything and become a kind of a mirror for your personal or transpersonal development, yeah. But that connection to nature is the key thing, and obviously, whatever you have kind of symbolically around you might reflect that, yeah. So it doesn't have to be, you know, most people who are kind of non-religious and non-spiritual appreciate nature. You know, it's very rarely people don't like nature.
Yeah. So I guess where that takes us to now is, how is your research impacting you?
Right. So yes, obviously it was a nice journey. I'm just thinking about as a story change.
Yeah.
But when I started and they show you this picture like a scramble kind of picture of things happening, it's like, oh, this is going to be it, but you come out of that. Well, it was sort of smooth-ish in some areas, and then it got complicated as it does, obviously. So looking back. Very positive. I've learned so much. And as I said earlier, this kind of scientific framework to think in a particular way is very helpful for a mind like mine, who goes in so many directions. So that was a major learning, how to be more convergent, specific, stick to things that work, and communicating as well. So, you know, I start kind of broad picture and now fine-tuning it. And fine-tuning in a particular area, obviously, and still kind of even talking to you, Debbie, just kind of thinking how I can bring the transpersonal more to this study, because it can be missed, really. Yeah, it's you know, as I said, it's a challenge how to kind of study that and get some insights. Yeah. So it's still a process, still a journey. What I've learned, patience. Yeah, patience. Because obviously, I'm just talking about kind of mechanics of studying. There was some delays and other things, and I was just reminding myself: determination, persistence, patience. Determination,
Yes.
persistence, and patience. Just it will happen. Even if it's get delayed, you know, that's not a big deal. I'm not kind of obsessed about finishing on time. As I said, you know, I wish I was studying probably part-time, because I'll be doing the same thing, you know, just have more time.
Yes. Yeah. So, but it sounds to me like what you're discovering is a refinement process. It feels a little bit like you had all the materials there, but there's something. What's that bit where you take something and you rub it with an abrasive on a stone?
Yeah, polishing. Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of polishing, refinement piece is coming in, which is very tactile.
In some ways, yeah. So that's on the kind of surface way, but I think I'm trying to transform. So obviously, I'm doing it for all kinds of reasons. Yeah. One kind of reason is kind of help the Feng Shui to be transformed and get to the next level. Because when you look at online, I don't recommend that. You get confused and you get quite a few false problems and superstitions. Don't read what they say about Feng Shui. A lot of people are quite ignorant about environments, and they're just parroting things and giving people false problems. So I'm trying to get to the next level, because I've been doing it for a long time. I've been involved in different organizations, and especially, you know, with the background in environmental psychology. So I'm trying to get it to the next level where we can kind of validate and, you know, look at this ancient tradition, which is still valid, has some germs, and without throwing the baby with the bathwater. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do. And obviously, another thing that I was thinking as a process, you know, obviously, I might do another PhD. I don't know whether I will or not, but kind of refining the research process is very interesting. Yeah, how, you know, when you look back at research in the old days, and even like when I was doing my MSc, you know, 15 years ago, was so different. You know, there was a handful of research methodologies. Now there's so many. It's amazing. I was like, wow, I didn't know you could do this or do that. So that's beautiful. Where it kind of generally the research science is evolving. Yeah, obviously there's problems with that as well, but so that's what my interest is as well. You know, how as a researcher, whether I'm doing another PhD or not, what I'm going to do next with this framework, with this understanding, how to, better myself, but also others, because I think I'm quite a good communicator. I blog about this all the time. So, so I'm doing it for other reasons. So obviously, if billions of design decisions for workplace bedrooms are based on these Feng Shui principles, and we can make people sleep better, hopefully that will kind of spread in other areas of life, and then obviously in workplaces for productivity and other things. And if we can kind of sprinkle a bit of transpersonal, and so people can discover that as well, So people get surprised that, when I say, I'm not religious, I'm not spiritual, saying, well, look at your garden, it's beautiful, that's spiritual. Oh, really? They don't make that connection immediately,
That connection with something else other than you.
Exactly, yeah. And often have the discussion, what do you dream about, and people kind of open up. Oh, I had this, lucid dreams. I don't know what to do. It's like, does it real? Is it what am I, So yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, so it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I come to the end of my questions. Do you think there's anything in there that I've missed, or that you would like to add, or?
I don't think so. I've covered most of the things. I think the interesting bit is that how research will evolve. And obviously, there's a huge interest in transpersonal development, and so there is a surge of interest and people want to do it. And by showing different aspects, including environmental, it's helpful for the whole study really of transpersonal, really. So and looking at all traditions, it's very nice actually to see that it's. Obviously, the environment is different. Chinese people didn't have mobile phones. They didn't know what a molecule was. So we've got a different kind of set of issues. But at the same time, look, this couldn't have happened without technology. And thanks to I Ching, actually. So the digital revolution started with I Ching. So Leibniz, the German mathematician who designed a binary system from which we have computers, was inspired by I Ching, which is part of Feng Shui tradition. So, so there's the connection. So that's beautiful, So
I want to thank you for giving me your time and talking about your research.
Thank you for having this conversation.